This video was brought to you by CuriosityStream. On Tuesday afternoon, Polish media reported that a missile had struck a grain dryer in Przydał, Poland, a small village near the country's border with Ukraine, and that missile killed 2 people. Originally, US intelligence claimed that the missile was Russian, at least according to a report by the AP. However, more evidence has since come to light over the past 36 hours or so, and it now looks like the missile might have been an S-300 air defense missile, fired by Ukraine at incoming Russian strikes on Tuesday afternoon. So in this video, we're going to take a look at exactly what just happened, why it's caused such a stir, and whether we could see NATO trigger Article 5. Hint, don't worry, it probably won't. So, this story really begins on Tuesday afternoon, when Russia rained down missiles on cities across Ukraine, in what Kyiv said was the heaviest wave of missile strikes in nearly 9 months of war. And this follows a familiar pattern. Basically, whenever Russia suffers a significant setback on the battlefield, they retaliate with massive strikes on Ukrainian infrastructure. This is exactly what happened in mid-September too, when Ukrainian forces staged a stunning counter-offensive in Kharkiv. Russia retaliated with a barrage of missile strikes in Kharkiv Oblast, cutting off power and water to much of the region. Now, the primary purpose of these strikes is political. While they might put pressure on Ukrainian logistics operations, they're essentially about appeasing Russian nationalists who are upset by Russia's losses on the battlefield. Anyway, this latest barrage of strikes was presumably in retaliation to the loss of Kherson City, which, as we covered in previous videos, hasn't gone down well with the more hawkish factions in Russia. So, on Tuesday afternoon, a couple of days after the Ukrainian army rolled into Kherson City, basically every large Ukrainian city was hit by missile strikes, causing widespread blackouts. According to Zelensky, Russian strikes have already destroyed a third of the country's power stations and seriously damaged 40% of Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Therefore, most Ukrainian cities are already scheduling rolling blackouts to manage electricity demand, and Ukrainian authorities have set up so-called heating points, where residents can shelter in the event of an energy shortage. Anyway, in and amongst these strikes, it looks like a stray missile landed in a Polish village 7 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, and just 70 kilometers away from Lviv, which was heavily targeted in Tuesday night's strikes. According to Polish media, at around 3:40 p.m., a missile landed in a grain dryer, killing 2 Polish citizens. While the Russian Foreign Ministry denied any involvement, instead claiming that the strike was a, quote, deliberate provocation aimed at escalating the conflict, the immediate assumption was that it was a stray Russian missile that had missed its target, presumably Lviv, and instead landed just over the border. In fact, at 7 p.m. on Tuesday evening, the Associated Press published a short piece citing a US intelligence official claiming that it was indeed a Russian missile. As well as that, a statement released by the Polish Foreign Ministry claimed that it was, quote, a Russian-made missile that landed in the country. Zelensky then put out a couple of tweets describing the event as an attack on the collective security of the Euro-Atlantic region, and described it as Russian missile terror, while the Ukrainian foreign minister described a tough and principled response, including the provision of modern aircraft and air defense systems to Ukraine, with the minister also dismissing the idea that it was a Ukrainian air defense missile as a conspiracy theory. Now, obviously, all of this got very heated very quickly, and that's because Poland is a NATO member. So there was a lot of anxious and excited chatter about the prospect of NATO triggering Article 5, which states that an armed attack against one NATO member shall be considered an attack against them all, and so requires NATO as a whole to collectively defend any member state from an armed attack. Obviously, a missile strike, whether accidental or not, would constitute an armed attack, and the fact that both Poland and Hungary convened emergency security councils suggests that they really were taking the prospect of Article 5 seriously. However, over the next 24 hours or so, evidence emerged to suggest that perhaps things weren't as simple as they first appeared. Internet sleuths analysed the images of missiles published by the Polish Rescue Service and concluded that the missile was probably from an S-300 missile system, a Soviet-era missile defense system that was first deployed in the late 1970s and widely used by the Ukrainians. Now, while this doesn't prove that it was the Ukrainians, the Russians did use S-300s to shell Mykolaiv back in an earlier phase of the war, it looks like the missile was probably a 5VV5, the first missile ever designed for the S-300s, which was in production throughout the 1980s. Now, 5VV5s only have a maximum range of about 100 kilometers, which means, if internet sleuths are to be believed, it's unlikely to have been fired by Russia and was more likely to have been fired by Ukrainian air defense systems. This is presumably why Biden changed the tone on Wednesday evening, saying that it was, quote, unlikely that the missile was fired from Russia. Similarly, on Wednesday afternoon, US officials told the Associated Press that preliminary investigations suggested that it was fired by a Ukrainian air defense system at an oncoming Russian missile. Soon after, the Polish Prime Minister said that the missile that hit Poland was very likely caused by Ukrainian air defense, but stressed that there are no signs of an international attack and described it as an unfortunate incident. To top it all off, after a meeting between NATO ambassadors in Brussels, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg told reporters that there was no indication that the missile was from Russia and that it was probably a Ukrainian air defense system misfiring. So what happens next? Well, Article 5 now looks very unlikely, given the change in tone from NATO leaders and the fact that while it might indirectly be Russia's fault, insofar as the 5V55 was fired in response to a Russian missile, NATO is unlikely to start World War III because of a misplaced Ukrainian missile. There's some speculation, though, that they could trigger Article 4, which states that NATO will, quote, consult together when, in the opinion of many of them, the territorial integrity, political independence, or security of any of the parties is threatened. But even if they do, this will most likely be a symbolic gesture, given that, well, everyone's clearly consulting with each other already. Perhaps the most interesting question, though, is how the West responds vis-a-vis arms shipments. On the one hand, this might remind them that as long as the war's ongoing, there is the chance of an accidental escalation that could end in World War III. So they might consider pressuring Zelensky into negotiating rather than shipping yet more arms. On the other hand, Russia's brashness in striking targets so close to NATO's borders and the fact that negotiations look unlikely might make them accelerate arms shipments, both to deter Russia from striking close to NATO's borders and to accelerate Ukraine's eventual victory. But it's not just this border with NATO which is a concern. Other countries like Georgia and Moldova could be pulled into political skirmishes as areas like South Ossetia and Transnistria seemingly actively want to join Russia. They're keen for a Putin takeover. We actually just released a brand new video on this exclusively on Nebula, all about South Ossetia, the region's history, their relationship with Russia, and if a referendum could see them willingly join Russia. Not only that, but we already have another Nebula exclusive video on Transnistria, the country which never existed, and their desire to become part of Russia. And that's just the beginning too. We have a whole load of other videos exclusively on Nebula as well. Plus the extended version of the TLDR daily briefing every single day. Signing up also gets you all of our videos ad-free, so no more of this nonsense. Anyway, if you do want to sign up to Nebula, the cheapest way of doing so is with the CuriosityStream Nebula bundle deal. That way, signing up to CuriosityStream for the crazy low price of $14.79 a year also gets you free access to Nebula. That's right, 2 streaming services for just over $1 a month. And by the way, CuriosityStream is awesome on its own. It contains absolutely boatloads of high-quality documentaries on all kinds of topics that I know TLDR viewers will love. So if you want both streaming services for less than $15 a year, then the link is in the description. And if not, well, I can't say I haven't tried to convince you. Thanks for your support.